Good morning. Welcome to the special meeting of the Glendale City Council for October 23rd, 2007. May we have the roll call, please?
Council members Draymond.
Here.
Quintero. Weaver. Here. Yusefian. Mayor Najarian.
Yeah, we put some
Here. And last week we left off where, Mr. Starbird?
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. I think we had gotten down to the Community Aquatic Center. I think that's where we broke. We'd had a conversation about Freeway Park Site A and the potential development ability there, the inaccessibility of Park Site C, so that has continued to stay on the back burner as far as options for park or soccer field development goes. You had asked that if Freeway Park Site A continues to be in the future picture, we look at what additional mitigation measures might be able to be achieved on Fern Lane. And that took us down to the Community Aquatic Center discussion, and we broke there, if I recall correctly.
Correct, yeah.
And if we're following along in the October 16th, 2007 spreadsheet, we're on the top of page
4 of 6.
Okay.
That's the one with the yellow bars on it.
Okay. Thank you.
So we have not included money in this round of the capital improvement program for Community Aquatic Center, focusing instead on the Pacific Edison Park, primarily because the Community Aquatic Center is such a large, requires such a large commitment of resources. And our view was that Pacific Edison is, at least at this point, a higher priority,
right,
and has more substance in terms of potential site, as well as being smaller cost.
However, we did put some ranges in there in terms of what it may or may not cost. Without property acquisition, it's going to be up in the $18 to $21 million price range, just comparatively speaking, in terms of what Santa Clarita did and some of the other surrounding cities, even San Fernando, who is going through a development stage of their pool project or their aquatics facility project. So anywhere between 18 to 21 million without acquisition, property acquisition. With property acquisition, we're looking at least $4.5 million per acre for property acquisition. We do have some slides. If you want to see some slides of some of the other facilities, we're going to be, if we get the go-ahead, we have a consultant who can look at 10 different sites, 6 of them are city sites, 4 are private sites in Glendale that could possibly accommodate an aquatics facility. And they'll look at those sites, they'll look at the economic feasibility of doing an aquatics project, what the community is looking for in an aquatics facility. All those analyses will be done by the consultant, and we can bring that back to the City Council. But at this point, it was so preliminary, we just took estimates from current projects or projects that have been done, such as Santa Clarita, estimated yesterday's dollars to today's dollars in terms of what it would cost us to build a similar facility. So at this point, it's anywhere between 16 to 21 million to build. With land acquisition, we'd need at least 3.5 to 4 acres to do something of that caliber at a site.
Do you have, and we've gone back and forth, and there apparently has been some question as how do you distinguish, what distinguishes a neighborhood pool from an aquatics complex? What facilities are included in one but not the other? Did you say you have some slides?
We have some slides, and Peter can come up here, the project manager. We have some slides of the San Fernando pool project, or the aquatics facility project. And also, I think
Can we see what they look like, just so we get an idea as to what the major differences are? And while you're doing that, George, the price that you gave us, 16 to 21, would that cost be in addition to any land acquisition cost?
that would, right.
Or
that would be
is there
without
land acquisition included in that?
No, that's not land acquisition included at all. And we estimated the land acquisition just based on the Dorn site that we ended up purchasing, based on some of the other sites in this part of the city. For example, we paid $2.4 million for the Cerrito site. And so those are, and that was years ago. So that's an estimate based on what we think land prices would be.
Yeah, more recent purchases like Dorn have been about $100 a square foot. We purchased an acre about an acre in the second phase of the Dorn acquisition, just east of Central, so it's right
About 4.5.
near the DSP, and that was about $100 a square foot.
Right.
So roughly $4.5 million an acre.
Okay.
Okay,
Do you have
so we-
the pictures?
And Peter can come up here and talk a little bit more about the projects.
Oh, and to clarify the aquatic center versus community pool, it's kind of an arbitrary naming just because we had two projects. One, the one at Pacific Park, was going to be a smaller pool just by based on the constraints of the site, whereas the other project was what would we do for more of a citywide pool as opposed to just one that's a much smaller facility. So any facility you could basically call an aquatics facility. It's just an arbitrary distinction, really. So could we have the lights?
Sure.
Let's see, and
There's something you're not seeing over at Southern California.
Is that the water close-up? Or is that an underwater shot?
oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Saying it couldn't be Southern California skies this morning, so.
You getting it, Peter? Should we just...
I don't know if it's just because it's so large. Yeah, I think it's such a large file. As George described, this is the preliminary scope of work that we would seek from the consultant. If the funds were available, we'll need funds to have them perform this scope of work. Here's a comparison of the sites.
It's hard to see.
Yeah, the sites the city sites that we're going to look at. Those include the Babe Herman parking lot, Griffith Manor Park, the Lot 30, which is also known as Park Vaquero, that parking lot south of the church on Verdugo, the National Guard Armory, the Polygon property, Site A, and a portion of Verdugo Park near the skate park. Those are the sites that we, at least at this point, are interested in having the consultant evaluate. Other facilities, that would be the next slide. As we've been discussing over the last several months, Santa Clarita, San Fernando, and Carlsbad. Like George said, if we took into account escalation starting the pool project sometime in 2009, 2010, Santa Clarita would escalate to over $21 million. San Fernando, which they built the pool separately, and they're in the process of building the rest of the facility now, and that would come out to about almost $20 million. And Carlsbad, which is the Cadillac right now, they're looking at building their facility in around 2010, I think, and that's $28 million. And then we just have a few slides that show those three facilities. There's San Fernando. You can see it's a competitive pool, and then there's a smaller community or a smaller, like a teaching pool, yeah. And then there's a zero entry. It's actually one combined pool you can see on the right, a zero depth entry and a water slide. So that's the San Fernando facility.
What size is that? Is the larger pool a 50-meter or 25
I
yard?
believe it's a 50-meter, sir.
Because those figures then aren't really drawn to scale.
Yeah, it's just a perspective.
Just a perspective.
And then our next slide shows Carlsbad, which is, they haven't completed working drawings. They're still trying to secure all the funding they need. This is the Cadillac. It's a 55-meter competitive pool, and then a smaller, what they're calling a 12-lane instructional pool. You've got several smaller pools, a therapy pool, wet playground, water slides, and the lazy river. So they're going all the way. And then, of course, the last facility that's always been on our mind is Santa Clarita, and that would be the next slide.
We move on.
How many acres on this?
Let's see, when I spoke with the project manager, I got the impression that that site was about 5 acres. And I think if you included the parking it needed, I think it was about 8.
Looks like from the right-hand side.
This is actually part of a larger park that's being constructed, and so I just figured a portion of the parking when I came across about that figure.
Did you get it? on the project? A pro forma for the project and operations, Peter?
I did not get that. But this facility, based on its layout, would seem to be one of those that Aquatic Design Group, when they were here a few weeks ago, projected that this facility would probably get close to paying for itself. With the lazy river, I think it would probably break even or go beyond that, but I can certainly see if I can get their projections. And then the next facility, of course, Santa Clarita. We've been talking about this one a lot. You've got the two competitive pools. One's a 25-meter, the other one's a 50, and then the zero-depth entry play area off to the right there. The rest of the facility, it's also part of a larger park. There's a gymnasium in the white shaded area that used to be a tilt-up light manufacturing warehouse, and there's going to be some sports fields as well. But that's the swim facility right there in color.
And when they built that, it was only $7 million back in or 99 or something?
Actually, what I have here for Santa Clarita is $11 million, and that was in 2003. It was completed in 2003. That was before. 2006 was when all that rapid escalation happened. They were talking 30% in some sectors.
Do we have any idea on the annualized maintenance cost for this kind of facilities?
I don't have it with me, but the consultant Aquatic Design Group has actually figures from, this is one of their clients, and their clients return surveys.
That'd be valuable to have, because that cannot be cheap to maintain.
Right. And that's one of the things that the director, I think it's Rick Gould, came across. They really wanted that 55-meter pool, and they knew they were going to have to pay for it every year. And I don't recall that they make money on this. It's a loss every year, but it's something that they decided was a priority for them.
Yeah, it's not a question of whether we do or not. It's just to be fully informed when making decisions, the annualized ongoing maintenance.
Right.
And that's going to have to come from somewhere.
Right, and that's part of what the consultant would provide in their feasibility study. They are going to be doing economic feasibility as well, surveys of the city, phone surveys, and possibly other surveys and workshops to get a feeling from the city how much the public is willing to use the facility and what kind of facility we could support here.
Let me just, and if I may add, when we were out there, we talked to the director. That zero-entry pool, the slide, is the most popular part of the pool, the project. They have high schools out there that don't have pools, so the high schools do use the competitive pool, and they divide that up into 2 or 3 areas, going, the short distance. But the most popular part of that is the slide and the areas that the families use.
Other question, are any of these complexes solar heated?
Not
Do
this
any of
one.
them have
This one
solar
wasn't solar
covers?
heated. No?
I believe that Carlsbad is going to integrate some solar into the project. When I spoke with Aquatic Design Group, particularly about Pacific, they thought that the size of the building that the pool required wouldn't provide all of the energy needs for the pool. It could supplement it, but you'd need a lot more roof area to actually completely supply the pool.
Because I know I never used the heater in my pool since '79. Never. And I've had 85-degree temperatures because of solar panels.
Right, and that's certainly something that they will look at, how best to balance the power needs for the facility.
Peter, if you can just point out the equipment room and the size of that. And
Let's see if I can-
it's important to note.
Okay, that's the equipment room there, with the pumps and the filtration and all that. This is the room that's got offices and a community room, things like that. And, of course, the director there, it seems like everyone we talk to, they always say, boy, I wish we'd had more storage, and I wish we had a larger facilities, room for the facilities. But it's always the first thing that gets cut. Well, first thing is storage. So they end up storing things on the pool deck instead of pulling things like pool covers and such into areas that protect them from the ultraviolet radiation. And so,
Do they have indoor lockers and showers?
yes, they do.
Okay, so that's all part of that larger central area?
Yes.
Okay.
Who
Those pumps are pretty heavy-duty pumps, commercial size.
Yeah, they are. Oops, there we go. That was where the lockers and the main entry lobby and all that are. Any other questions? And of course, this is just a summary of Santa Clarita that was done before I did that other spreadsheet. I mean, you can see $10.5 million back in 2003. Now it's $21 million. Or actually, in 2009, it'd be $21 million.
And that would not include land? That would
No.
just be construction costs?
Construction and soft costs.
Okay.
And just thinking out loud, Rose Bowl Center has a, do they have a corporate sponsor in any
No.
way? And what, well, I guess my real question is, what are the opportunities for corporate sponsorship to, in terms of branding or naming, that could help defray some of either the maintenance or the capital costs on this type of project?
You know, Mayor Najarian, I'm not sure at this time that that's something we can ask the consultants to look into, but I don't know if the RBOC has a corporate sponsor at this point. It's always been the Rose Bowl Aquatics facility. Hasn't been anything like the Nokia or anything like that.
I think they're the Athletic Federation.
The Amateur Athletic
Yeah,
Federation.
has a lot of branding, and they're always referring that to the AAF pool. So I'm not sure what that means, whether it's just a acknowledgement of the class of the facility, or whether there's some sponsorship involved.
And that was the Amateur Athletic Foundation that spun off from the '84 Olympics, I think.
I believe.
And they still provide money to all different types of facilities and events. So it's kind of minor. We've looked into some of that money as well,
Right.
for some of the soccer fields.
And the city of Santa Clarita was fortunate enough to obtain a lot of their money, most if not all, from state grants. Is that correct?
Right here. Yeah,
That's how they're advertising.
yes, we have a tally.
Yeah, 12.8 million. Total, they had state grants, let's see, HUD. They had park bond money from the county, 753,000. Water revenue, 3 million.
Yeah,
2 million, 2.4 million from HUD. So, yeah, they pooled a number of different
Sources.
sources. State bond, 1 million per capita. Roberti Zeeberg, 349,000. Right. So they didn't really use their general fund CIP money.
Obviously my thoughts are looking at those complexes, the Carlsbad, even the Santa Clarita, and San Fernando as well, that they're very attractive. I think that clearly our residents should be entitled to that type of facility. However, it is expensive, and there's no doubt about that. One of the tricks we have at the MTA is, despite capital projects for the MTA are extremely expensive, is to have a working plan ready on the shelf. That's one of Zev Yaroslavsky's favorite items, is have it ready to go in the event that funding is available or grant applications are accepted. You're a step ahead of the competition. You've got a package ready to go.
Right.
And I think that there is some, although there would be an initial outlay for the consultant to develop the plans, as well as staff time and input, I think it's certainly it's a good tack to take at this point. We don't know where that money might come from. Who knows? Washington, state level, private grants, and if we've got something ready to go, or if the city itself were to find some money in some undiscovered account, I'm just kidding, but in some area, or additional availability of funds, we wouldn't have to start this process from stage one and go through perhaps months and years of planning and designing.
Well, absolutely. It's much like our Trails Master Plan. We have to have the master plan in place and then go after the grant money that may be available out there. Without that, you couldn't go after the grant money. But I think you're right, is be ready with it.
Mr. Quintero?
Yes, I would agree. I think the best bet is to go ahead and do some, at the bare minimum, renderings, but, I mean, get a real good feel, even do whatever preliminary engineering might be necessary, and if we're talking about certain square footage in terms of the footprint and so forth, I think it could be fit into whatever site we eventually choose and whenever the funding is available, but I think that's a very good idea.
Mr. Weaver?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear my colleagues talking like this. Ever since I've been on council, I promoted getting stuff designed and ready in case funding comes up or we deem it appropriate to do it. So, hallelujah, I back it 100%.
Hallelujah.
Go as far as you
Can I
go
get
as far
an
as you
amen?
can.
Well, we do have the...
Amen.
I'm sorry, were you going to say something, Mr. Drake?
Amen. That was going to be an
I
amen.
wasn't going to say an amen, but I
Councilman
will if you like, George. No, I was going to say, what I hope somebody is noting, this is a day when Councilmember Weaver and Zev Yaroslavsky and our own mayor are all on the same page. How can you not support that?
Let me think about that.
Great minds
Well, we do...
swim in the same aquatic complex.
There you go.
Mr. Starbuck?
A couple of things. I think we should get the operating budgets from Santa Clarita since theirs is completed. And I would imagine Carlsbad and the others we've mentioned have budgets even though facilities aren't completed. We should see what they estimate their operating costs will be. Our largest constraint will likely be, in addition to just the money to build it, but will be finding sites that it could be built on, the land component. And where something of this size could be sited that would be accessible. Usually grants will like to see a pretty picture, but they also want to know you're going to be able to move in a certain period of time, and land acquisition could take a considerable period of time. So we should, I think, begin on two fronts. One is to develop a concept plan, but two would be to identify some potential sites. And if those happen to be private sites, then looking at some point to acquiring a site. If you have a site, it's going to be easier to get a grant than if you don't have a site. A good concept with no site is going to be harder to get grant funds than if you happen to have a piece of land that you're holding for this purpose.
And we do have, the consultant has 10 potential sites to look at. 6 of them are public. There are 4 potential private sites that the consultant can look at as well.
George, do we need to put money in the CIP to develop the concept
To
plan?
do that, yeah, we do.
Okay, so we'll come back with a figure probably in the 08-09 timeframe to develop a concept plan.
It could be any time
Okay.
we can start this year.
Well, we'll get a cost estimate from the consultant and bring that back the next time we bring the plan back to you.
To what extent is the Pacific Edison location feasible for this 3-acre size?
It's going to be too small to do a bigger facility. It would
You
take-
need to consume the fields. Right now, we've kept the aquatic center to what is the current aquatic features, the water features, and some portion of that concrete area, the plaza area.
You'd have
How
to
about
take...
across the street? Wasn't that city's property at some point?
You mean the old school?
I'll defer that to
Ashland
Mr. Starver.
Old school?
But the pool was located at that, across the street, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was located on the existing park site. It'd be on
was
the
it?
southwest corner, somewhat of the southwest corner of the existing
It was
site.
kind of in the middle of the south border of the block.
Originally, the school district was going to abandon the school site after the development of the new school, and that was going to become a potential for additional parkland, the siting for the new pool, a whole variety of things. After the construction of the site, the school district made the determination that it was in their interest to keep the existing school site.
So we put the school on our site,
Right.
and they kept the school site.
Right.
Yeah, I have a little different recollection as this moved along, and that was the commitment was where the field is currently, the part of the school site, not the whole school site, but the part of the school site where I think the cafeteria is and is currently parking. They had committed to keep that, to at some point have that become green space and utilize the cafeteria auditorium as a community room. Remember that at one point in the evolution of that project, it expanded from assembling about 75% of the block to assembling 100% of the block. The district then had to contribute considerably more dollars into offsetting the additional cost of acquisition. And I think it was at that point that the site got bigger that we pulled back from the original concept, which had a good portion of the park being shifted over to the school site. Now, keeping the part of the existing Edison school that fronts on Pacific as green space, that's where we've had our rub with the district, because that really hasn't happened. But when the Edison Pacific site expanded, they began to pull back away from the concept of allowing the entire school site to become park facility. They recognized they'd probably want to keep both facilities, and they were having to invest considerably more dollars to enlarge the Pacific Edison site as well.
To what extent are the funds that are currently budgeted for the Pacific Park pool available for deferral, let's say, or transfer to a larger aquatic complex?
I think the 1.4 million state grant would be. The others are CDBG, and
Right.
I don't know if they'd be
And
able to make a determination
the requirements would
community-wide.
be physical location or
Yeah, I think-
neighborhood served or...
I think if Jess is here, he could better answer that. But Jess, do you want to come up and answer that? Because my understanding is it has to be in a CDBG catchment area, but if it serves a greater area, maybe that can be used.
Morning, Mayor Najarian. In order to use the CDBG funds, we would have to meet the test of benefit to low-income, primary benefit to low-income families, which means that it would have to be located in southern Glendale, or we would have to collect documentation that the families that are coming to use the pool, if it's not in southern Glendale, are low-income families. And the problem we would run into deferring the Edison Pacific project, we've got over $2 million proposed for that project in CDBG funds, is that very shortly, like within 6 months, we'll begin to get letters from HUD because our expenditure rate of our CDBG funds is too slow, because HUD expects us to be spending the funds as they're allocated.
Well, we just reviewing the numbers, we have $1.2 million from the 07-08 CDBG. So that's money that was approved in this fiscal year.
Correct.
Prospectively, we will be bringing back to you a pre-designation for the 08-09 CDBG year, and then as we get into 09-10, another pre-designation for 09-10 of another $1.2 million each year for 2.4. So the CDBG committed currently, which has been budgeted, is $1.2 million. That's the component that you could run into some timing issues. The other two haven't happened yet. The other $2.4 million are prospective for 08-09 and 9-10. And then we have a $1.4 million state grant that you could have a timing problem with.
And that commitment that hasn't been expended yet, is that city projects that haven't started, or are they other nonprofit projects? The $1.2 million, or whatever the number is, that HUD is starting to pressure you about, are those commitments from city projects that haven't been spent, or from nonprofits?
It would be both. It would apply to both.
Well, let's be clear. The $1.2 million in 07-08, are there other city projects that are CDBG funded that are problematic?
That are lagging? No, they're all underway. They're in design or out to bid, or specs. Plans and specs are being prepared.
So as we move out of the 07-08 fiscal year and haven't expended the $1.2 million, then HUD's going to start to make noise about that. This has us accumulating CDBG money over a 3-year period of time.
Right. So we would have to be expending funds, for example, on pre-development costs or
Right.
design costs for consultants, so that we can show that we're making progress.
Right.
Does the city have control of the Pacific Edison site, Jim, both the concrete area up front but also behind it, or is there some sort of demarcation line between cities' control and school?
Well, as I recall, we did have to put in some lines in terms of land control in case there was ever a divorce between the school district and the city, so that if we ever had to unwind this project, we do have sites that have each agency has a respective underlying fee, if I recall. But we have the equivalent of reciprocal easement agreements over each other's property. So realistically, anything we'd want to do at Pacific Edison, whether legally or just practically, needs to have the approval of the school district. So a project like this, we'd want to move forward with it hand in hand with the district to make sure that they're comfortable with what's being done.
But there's a big field behind the school.
There's a general purpose field that's to the west of the school site. There's the baseball diamond that is in the southwest quadrant of the block.
I mean, are those hands-off, those areas?
Well, I think that's in the school district area, and
Yeah.
it is programmed. It's programmed every day. There's soccer use, and the field actually starting to look worn already.
Yeah, I would guess that the general purpose field is part of the district's parcels. The baseball field is part of our parcel.
Right.
But then again, there's joint use agreements that cover the entire site, from the library to to those fields, including the baseball and the gymnasium. That's right, in particular.
Well, what if they let us have that land and we put a soccer field across the street where they have that extra land? I mean, that maybe takes us down to the other thing, but my point is here, I guess the direction that I'm going is, we've got some money earmarked for a pool, we've got a site for a pool, we've got a 25-yard pool, a smaller community pool in mind. With a little bit of extra planning and a little bit of extra funding, we could make this serve both purposes. The larger pool, plus create some soccer facilities across the street in our successful joint venture program that we have with the schools. Mr. Quintero.
I anticipate the answer will be no. And if I remember correctly, I think they're now using that former elementary school as some sort of academy.
I think it is.
Oh, yeah, I think they're...
And this discussion kind of took place before I got here, but there was a great deal to do about having a school on one side of the street and play fields on the other side of the street at Pacific, and how you were going to get kids in classes from one side to the other. One of the big advantages of taking the entire block and repositioning the school was we got away from that problem of how are we going to have play fields on one side and school on the other. All the play fields were consolidated in one block.
And maybe if we can do this, maybe we can ask the consultant to look at the current site, where we're at, and maybe even see if we can expand that to some of the concrete area and see if we can create a bigger site in that.
But I don't, well, you could have the consultant look at it. My instincts tell me the Edison Pacific site isn't going to be big enough for what you have in mind relative to an entire Santa Clarita-style aquatic center. I just can't imagine there's enough land there.
Maybe not at that level, but maybe another zero entry and a little play area. And
you could also look at the design of whatever you do on Edison Pacific with the prospect that we have become aware that there are parcels available to the south of, what's the street, Riverdale, south of Riverdale, potentially over west of Kenwood. That's large industrial parcels there. It's relatively large industrial parcels to the south of Riverdale. And any design that takes place on Edison Pacific could anticipate subsequent phases that could happen across the street on Riverdale, as an example.
That's potential park site.
Potential park site, additional aquatics facilities.
And is this the same consultant that we're using for both?
Yes.
I mean, if he could just keep that in mind as he goes through his brainstorms. Obviously, we're trying to save money.
Yeah.
We're trying to get as big a facility as possible with those funds.
Right.
Serve an underserved community, but at the same time serve the community as a whole for their aquatic needs.
Absolutely. It's a great idea. I think I know where you want to go with it, and we'll have the consultant take a look. If it's anything possible,
we should
bring it
also
back.
clarify with the district what their long-term plan is for Edison Pacific. Okay. Well, plus is it's in a CDBG eligible area, so you could look forward to additional funding for a larger facility.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else on the aquatic complex?
Okay, so I have on the aquatics complex included a number that allow us to move forward probably before the end of this fiscal year with a broader concept plan that would incorporate going past just the Edison Pacific community pool to subsequent phases or additional phases for a more complete city aquatics facility.
We currently have about $40,000 for the consultant to look at this, but I'm not sure it's going to be enough. I think he needs about $150,000, so we can get him going now, and then maybe get the remainder of the funding for the next
Is that in the
fiscal year.
redevelopment zone?
It's close, yes, it's close to San Fernando corridor. So you
Presumably any
You can make a
tax
finding.
increment that's generated or impact fees could be available.
Well, impact fees don't have to be limited to the project area. So impact fees, certainly you can use those anywhere. Tax increment revenues, my guess is it's right on the border of the project area, so you probably wouldn't have difficulty finding a benefit to the project area. Yeah.
Okay,
You need to
good.
make a benefit finding, but probably wouldn't be hard because it's right there on the border.
Mr.
I
Quintero?
would also like to have you talk to the YM, the YW, and the YM up in La Cañada, just to get an idea of what they charge, what you have to join, what the procedures are in terms of using those facilities.
And some of the rental, I know their pools are rented out by different groups, and let's look at both sides of the equation, both the potential income and the expenses
Sure.
that they generate. Okay. Thank you. Did we cut you off, Mr. Starbird, or were you?
No, that's
you were
fine.
done? Okay. Well, let's move on to the next one then.
The next one is the Columbus soccer field. Again, we had discussions with the school district. They are ready and eager, actually, to hand over that portion of the site for us to develop if we want to develop it into a soccer field. And we would propose artificial turf with lights at a cost of $3.5 million. The new projection, I think, we thought they would be able to provide us the graded site in January '09. Looks like it may be a little later than that, based on a recent email that I saw. So it may be summer of '09 that they clear the site. And again, that's just a rough estimate on their part, Jim.
So if it were summer of '09, then we have a one-year construction period probably?
Yeah.
So you'd be...
We designed...
The season of 2010-11.
Right.
And we have this currently plugged in with the appropriation in 9-10, so it's possible that number could be kicked out a year. You'd still do your design in 08-09, but it could be 10-11 before you actually get to construction, which could have an impact on our estimated cost if inflation, another year of inflation carry.
It just depends on when they clear the site, when they're finished with their construction.
And, George, on that $3.5 million sort of ballpark figure that we have, soccer field figure, how much of that is actually for the turf itself?
The construction on turf part is about $2.1 million. With
How about the
grading-
actual material, the
on
product?
the material itself.
Is that a large component?
Boy, it's about $16 a square foot, both for the turf and the base material underneath.
Have there been any, as this becomes more popular and more municipalities and private organizations are going to that, are we seeing any sort of design changes or production efficiencies that are lowering that price?
I don't know at this point. I'll check that. I know that there aren't a lot of municipalities that have the kind of use that we do. Our fields are always used. Most of the fields are in high school fields, where the high school uses it during the day and some groups use it at night. But we'll check with the consultant that did the work and see if there is some savings.
And probably none of these have been in place for the estimated life of the material as yet, which was in the 10-year range.
It was 10 to 12, and
So we're probably now getting, in the next few years, you'll begin to get to the point that some of these fields will be looking at replacing the grass material.
Yeah, the actual carpet itself isn't that costly. It's all the base material underneath, the preparation. If I recall, I think the estimate to replace it was about $150,000 to $200,000 for the carpet itself.
That's not bad,
Yeah.
actually.
Let's get some figures from
Yeah.
the manufacturer of ours to see what
And
it
so
is.
the replacement, whether it's at our sports complex or anywhere else, will be much cheaper than what it costs to actually install it in the first place.
Right.
You're just like changing carpet, keeping
And we-
the underlayment.
We do have those figures. They're downstairs.
And you're beginning to get facilities that have been around long enough that they're going to begin approaching the 10-year estimated life, so they'll get a better handle on what the actual life expectancy is on some of these facilities, which is yet I don't think anybody's had one long enough.
Right. And again, our use is
Yeah.
very intense, so we'll see how long that lasts.
Okay?
Comments on the soccer field?
Glendale High School tennis courts?
Well, we should probably touch quickly on the soccer fields generally. And we've anticipated the council's desire to do more than just the Columbus soccer field within the 10-year timeframe. A lot of that depended on what might happen with Freeway, Park Site A, and the 6 to 8 acres there, of which we had estimated about $5.5 million, which would be 2 soccer fields. So that's really anticipated to be a soccer field site. We didn't plug in additional soccer fields here. We did note during the discussion of Columbus Soccer Field that we have evaluated the other school sites, and there are 3 or 4 other school sites that would lend themselves to soccer fields. And you could probably take the Columbus model and just replicate them across those schools. However, you don't get quite as big a return for your investment because those are fields that are probably being used now by the various soccer groups. So you don't get an additional field, you just get the extended play benefit.
I think the only one may be Dunsmore, where it's
Dunsmore?
blacktop. It's blacktop right now.
So there you might actually get the benefit of an additional field. So we've anticipated that at least in the 10-year time frame, if the Freeway Site A comes together and there are upwards of 2 fields there, then that and Columbus or 3 new soccer fields would be the objective for this 10-year period. So we didn't plug in additional dollars for other soccer fields in this 10-year period. However, I should point out under new park development, recognizing that there will always be a lot of demand in the new park development category, we have plugged in there for discussion $1.7 million a year in each of the 10 years. So it's possible that if some other opportunity for a soccer field arose in this 10-year time frame, and we'd already done Parkside A and we'd done Columbus, it takes about 2 years of the allocation for new park development to do a soccer field on an existing school site.
Okay.
Okay. And I think just to note that Bob and I were out there, we met with Supervisor Antanovich's field rep. It's very promising in terms of what they may be able to contribute to a Freeway Site A
Be helpful.
project.
Does the county have much money for recreational? I mean, they passed a bond. Where I know I looked at my tax bill the other day. I'm paying a bond for recreational facilities. Is any of that money?
I think it is. I think Susie was telling us that they have projects all over the county, and the supervisor actually is involved with a number of them, and gets a number of requests, and is able to fulfill some of those requests. So there is money out there.
That's a really good time.
Can we set up a meeting with them?
We met with her
That's a good
last week, I think it was.
last
wasn't it?
week.
And
Susie Niemer.
Susie Niemer. And she's going to go back and talk to the supervisor and get back to us in terms of what kind of...
Her comment was that it was very doable, in particularly if we could do this over a multi-year period of time. If we needed all the money up front at one time, that would be very difficult because of the number of project demands. But if we can do this over a 2 to 3 year period of time, which would be consistent with what we're doing, they could make that level of, they would be more likely they can make that level of commitment. And I'd say they're very interested. Yes.
And we're including all our recreational needs in there, such as the aquatic complex.
Well, no, I think that's when we talked about soccer fields, artificial soccer fields and lights, to kind of meet the demand of the soccer players. And apparently the supervisor is very interested in soccer fields. He has 2 kids who are playing soccer at this point, so he understands the need, which really does help, yeah.
His kid beat my kid last weekend.
Is that right? Okay.
Not to imply that the little monsters threw the game against the Aquamen, but
she didn't give a figure, but it would be substantial in terms of the supervisor's contribution if we were to do this project.
And how about Adam Schiff? I mean, I know that on some of my previous trips to Washington, on our council, our city legislative agenda, we have included recreational facilities, pools, among many things. So let's really put the full court press on obtaining funding from different sources. We just have a dramatic need for it.
We have our grant writer looking at all possibilities. Now that Prop 84, money from Prop 84 is going to be available, we're going to be aggressively going after that as well, even helping to write some of the guidelines so that it favors us more than some of the others.
And my guess is the key is going to be have a vision and a concept for this. I mean, have a pretty picture to show, and even possibly have a site that you could note, this is where this thing could go. Then you're much more likely to get support than if you're just saying we need some money, but we don't quite know exactly what it is.
That's the point I wanted
we
to make.
want yet. Yeah.
Congress will respond to having a site and a specific plan. not shooting in the dark.
Right, and I think even some of the grant sources, because of our ability to kind of match some of the money required more than some of other cities, helps us along in terms of that raise.
Okay.
That takes us to the Glendale High School tennis courts.
Right. At this point, I don't know if you want to give an update. We're just waiting word from Glendale High School.
Now, let me tell you what I've continued to propose to the superintendent. We have $675,000 of existing funding that's in a previous year CIP, so that money is available. The estimate is that this project will cost about $900,000. We'd previously spoken to the district, I think under a previous estimate, when we first started this, was about $175,000. We've continued to refine our numbers with the increase in construction costs, and now think it's probably closer to $900,000. I've continued to indicate to Dr. Escalante that I think the school district needs to look at providing some support for this project by means of plugging the gap. At one point it was $175, now it's $225. And I've suggested that because of their difficulty with the pressure from the other capital projects, that we'd be willing to consider recommending utilizing the same funding mechanism for this as we did with the turf project at Glendale High School, and that is advancing to them their future tax increment, which would just really add this amount of money to the loan, but that we really wanted to see some contribution from the district, because in this case it really does rehab existing facilities, which would significantly improve their use of those tennis courts. And I think as a result the principal has been actively supportive of the project there, because she recognizes that. But that from a philosophical perspective, there needed to be some contribution to the district recognizing that. He was going to have some feedback from the board last week, and I just sent him an email this morning realizing that I hadn't yet heard back. So we as yet don't know what their position is relative to the GAP funding. We tried to make it as painless as possible so that they really wouldn't have any current out-of-pocket expenditure, but that they would, at the end of the day, finance it through future tax increment revenues flowing back to the school district. And we as yet don't have an answer from them on that.
Now, in view of the parking and traffic issues with the surrounding neighbors, and specifically the car park neighbors, what are we going to do to try to mitigate the impact? I know this is on the west side of the campus, but is there parking, or how much parking is available other than the big lot on the west side?
Councilman Quintero, there is parking on the northwest corner, which
Right.
we would utilize for the tennis courts. And we also were looking at cutting into the curb for handicap parking, moving the fencing in a little bit, and cutting into the curb for handicap parking. So there wouldn't be an impact to the neighbors on the other side at all. It would just be a matter of getting people from that parking lot to the tennis courts. And some of that is ADA issues.
The district would need to be willing to leave that northerly lot open, though.
Oh, yeah.
They just have to be willing to do that. Otherwise, you would have an impact on Verdugo, which is already fairly impacted as it is.
And the principal is willing to do that at this point.
And the leagues and the private contractors that were giving instructions and so forth, how have they fared since?
Well, our proposal would be to have the contractor, one of the contractors, be in charge of that facility as well, and have the teaching facility there, so people can come in and use that facility after 4 o'clock during the school day and all day, weekends and into the evening. So it would be made available to the community, after school hours and weekends, at holidays, and anytime the school's not there. So the people that are playing at the ARC could easily go over to Glendale High School. It's still south of the 134. It actually increases the number of tennis courts. We currently have 4. It would be 6. And with lights, they can go till 10 o'clock.
And this same amount of money someplace else, like at Fremont Park, would produce how many courts, George?
2 courts.
2 courts.
At Fremont, we wouldn't have to build a restroom.
I would like to, again, as we discuss recreational facilities, the issue of our interaction with the school district always comes up. And although we're clearly on the same page and on the same team in terms of providing the best facilities for our youth and our adults in some regard. Many times, I think we do have to deal with them at an arm's length transaction. And what I would like to do would be to request this to be agendized. I was hoping we wouldn't lose our city attorney at this time.
Something you said.
Agendized for a closed session where we can discuss a broader policy with the school board in terms of our projects, which would not perhaps be best discussed, at least in the public at first.
We'll have to see if we can. My instincts tell me you'll be pretty limited in having a closed session discussion about that broad topic, unless you have a specific piece of land you're considering for sale or purchase, and you're going to give instructions to your negotiators. I don't know that you could have a closed session discussion about the broader policy, but you're right. It's Scott can better respond to that than I can. I don't think he's ducking the question.
And I'm more than happy to, several specific parcels have come up in this discussion so far, several of them at the Pacific Park. Some of the issues surrounding the location of the courts at Glendale High School, and I would like to, rather than deal with these on a piecemeal basis as far as the city's concerned, have perhaps a broader vision as to how we'll be able to cooperate with them. Mr. City Attorney, do you agree with my suggestion?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'd step out from...
Okay, you're excused. My thoughts were that we agendize this for a closed session in which the city council would discuss the negotiations and future negotiations with the school district over our joint use projects. Is that legal?
My suggestion is you and I talk about that privately. I can tell you right now that under the Brown Act, you need to be discussing a project, and you need to be discussing or negotiating the purchase price, the lease, the exchange with that. The whole purpose of the closed session is to provide direction to your negotiators to negotiate for a specific project, not a broad conceptual notion of how we're going to handle joint projects or not. It really is to negotiate for the acquisition of or disposal of real property.
Okay, let me then speak with you off the dais and give you a little better understanding as to where I would like to go with it, and you can then give me direction as to whether it's too broad or whether it's appropriate for a closed session.
I'd be happy to.
Okay. Mr. Draymond.
Can I just ask George, just as a quick question, did we ever find out what the condition of those former tennis courts are over at Dunsmore? We talked about it very briefly at a previous CIP budget study. It seems like a long time ago, but I realize it's probably not.
Courts.
The Lost Courts at Dunsmore Park, immediately adjacent to what is now Clark Magnet School.
Boy, I know we have one court there. You talked about at one point there were more than one court.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And actually, I think Michael Lawler was here at that particular meeting and was verifying they're still there. But what the status of them is...
Bob, I don't have
I remember them from when it was Clark Junior High, and
They were rather stepped down. They were in between adjacent to the flood control, kind of behind the ball field, in between the ball field and the campus,
which is now grass. It's a grass.
I'm sorry?
It's grass area over there at this point.
We had several people here in the audience saying, no, they're over there quite a bit, and they're just sitting there.
Okay, we'll drive
in what condition? And that was what...
Well, let me take a look. I know I go up there a lot for ball games. My son plays ball up there, and I've walked back there. I haven't seen any
The way I remember
concrete
it,
pads.
Yeah.
that's a little while ago, but the way I remember it when it was Clark Junior High is to access the ball field, you had to sort of cross over a little area by the flood control channel, and there were these tiered courts that were there.
Let me take a look. I'll go up there and take a look today and take some photos and see.
Just curious, because if there's something we can make use of that's just sitting there, it's much better.
Okay. I know you and I talked about that, and sorry, I just didn't go up there and follow up.
Okay.
Well, so on this project, we have it listed as $225,000, which essentially closes the gap. In 0809, we noted a question mark possible funding source of GUSD, but in the absence of that, there would be $900,000. We've labeled it GHS tennis courts, but our presumption has been it's either Glendale High School tennis courts or it's some other courts. We have an obligation for at least is it for 2 replacement courts or 1 replacement court?
2 replacement courts.
Two replacement
under the
courts
EIR.
under the EIR. So the alternative site we had been looking at is Fremont Park.
And we,
For the
you know,
addition of 2 more courts.
We have 30% drawings on Fremont Park. We were ready to go until the Glendale High School courts came up. And we actually thought it would be better for, overall for the community and the kids to benefit from newer courts. Or else, we're ready to go with Fremont anytime.
Okay. Next item?
Okay, so as it is, we'll leave funding, as is noted here. Probably a better title for this is ARC replacement tennis courts, because that's really what's driving this project. So we'll note this as no particular project site until we get back information from the district on their position, and you've had a chance to confer with the city attorney. But we'll label this just ARC replacement tennis courts.
Right.
Okay.
We do have to get going sooner than later, though, because the court's going to be going down soon at the ARC, and we do need to replace them. The next is Dog Park. We talked about this before. We identified San Rafael as a good site for a potential dog park, and we put $500,000 in here for a higher-end dog park, and that would include grading, a parking lot, fencing, utilities, a restroom, irrigation and turf. Although the restroom would be a nice porta potty, wouldn't be one that would tie up to the sewer system, because the sewer system, I think, is located further down, and it would be costly to bring the sewer system in. So those are the things that would be included in the dog park budget. Again, we have $50,000 for plans and specs. And
we're anticipating that site off of Camino San Rafael, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Draven?
With regard to the dog park, is there a possibility that we could talk to, that we could find out with some sort of definition what they're doing or planning with
County.
With the county, Two-Strike Park or other areas up in the La Crescenta, Montrose area, because they are also moving on sort of a parallel course.
So the county's plans so they're talking about a dog park in the north end?
Yes, they've been talking about it, and the question, every so many weeks we see a headline in the paper that says, talks for dog park moves forward. What that means, I have no idea.
At Two-Strike Park?
And that's one of the locations.
Well, we'll just find out generally what the status is on their discussions.
Mr. Weaver?
Would you also mind checking in to see about a corporate sponsor? Alpo, Purina, you name them. Someone taken a bad rap lately. Maybe to have a dog park with their name on it in this area might be something they'd pay for the whole thing. Who knows?
Okay, we'll look into
A lot
project.
a lot of money in dog and cat food.
Project manager sitting out there. I'm sure he's making notes, and I've got the notes here. We'll take a look at those.
Nestle produces
Alpo, maybe?
the chow, puppy chow, dog chow brand.
Well, they manufacture little plastic bags.
Okay.
Pooper scoopers. Okay.
That's a form of sponsorship.
Next, please.
Next is the new park development. This was money that was in prior budgets. We had taken it out and identified specific projects for this. We're now looking at any time a piece of property comes up for either a mini park or an expansion of a mini park. This line item could help in the development and purchasing and developing of any new parks in the city. Again, we're looking at, my preference would be to look at properties around, contiguous to current mini parks to see if we can expand some of those. Wilson Mini Park comes to mind. Wilson's awfully small, usually gets 75 to 100 people there. And there could be a potential expansion opportunities, but this is where this line item would come in.
Most of our mini parks offer those kinds of opportunities, but in the absence of that, probably takes 2 to 3 years of this annual allocation to do a new mini park. Assuming we can find a piece of property that doesn't have very expensive multifamily housing on it, about every 3 years you'd be doing another mini park, or, I mean, any year's allocation could conceivably acquire, some adjoining residence and then expansion of a park. So it probably has, if you look at it as a mini park as the common denominator, you've got a mini park about every 3 years, or maybe an expansion of a mini park more often than that. So in the course of 10 years, there's funding here for about 3+ mini parks new, or expansion of a number of the existing mini parks.
If a property owner wished to donate the land and requested the park be named after him, do we have a policy on that?
No, we don't currently have a policy on that.
We don't have a policy, but we've talked to a number of property owners who frankly have inquired about the use of their property, and we've indicated a strong willingness to consider that if they're interested in making donations. We certainly look at naming a park in memoriam of somebody to do that, but we don't have a formal policy on it.
Money talks.
Yeah.
Forth, I bet you we'd establish a real quick policy.
Right.
Again, we've indicated an
Seems
openness
like
to it. We've spoken with people, and we raised that a great deal. Is a willingness to look at how a park could be named, or facilities within parks or buildings could be named.
Just like any other foundation or private group has attempts upon death to bequeath part of the estate to the city.
Brand Park?
As an example, as a large example of that.
Sure.
It'd be something to get out there and publicize. I'm not sure that folks necessarily, unless you're tuned into city council somewhat regularly, not aware that we are looking for land anywhere around the city, and that it may have some estate tax planning purposes as well. So
We can certainly come up with a policy, bring it to City Council in the near future, get it approved by City Council, and then start publicizing that fact.
I think we should do that. I mean, if we can obtain,
can do that.
and it doesn't have to be an entire parcel of land. It can be some funding, the Quintero baseball field, or the Weaver diving board, or whatever. On your way up, and go to full plots of parkland and et cetera.
I got a better idea. There's Duke Nation Park. Maybe we could have Schwarzenegger Park, legacy.
Right, and he was instrumental in the funding of that park.
Did affect the funding for
And
that park.
how did we get that? Was that, how did we get that funding?
He was actually through the accumulation of money for the park. We literally had $1 million gap, and through efforts that involved Larry Zarian and the Governor Duke Nation at the time, went to back very strongly and literally closed the gap with the last $1 million to do the acquisition.
So it was a state
of the park.
grant.
State grant.
State grant.
I mean, that's...
State grant, or
Behold, named the park after the governor.
Well, Schwarzenegger doesn't have a park named after him yet, does he?
Well, the Schwarzenegger City Aquatics Facility, Glendale Community Aquatics
An
Facility.
idea.
Oh, it's interesting. We also talked about that with the fields over at Freeway Site A. Supervisor Antonovich does have an open space preserve in his name out in the Santa Clarita area. Now, it may be burned up right now, but I mean, that's the area I think that the fire was in, Stevens Ranch area. Could be.
Okay.
Those are all good ideas. Supplemental park upgrades? Well, so, and again, recognizing, let me come back on the new park development, recognizing that the CIP doesn't balance yet, because we're really not done with the revenue side of this level of funding, from your perspective, looks okay for this period and this iteration of the plan.
So we're just salting that away
Each year,
ready to pounce on any available properties if the price is right.
And it could be that it takes you a few years to find, I mean, if it's a new mini park, you might be using a few years of your funding. If it's expansion of existing park, then you might get, you might only use half of a year's funding to pick up a parcel of land.
As we've said, with the Duke Nation Park and the way Congress is, the more money we have solid away that we can put
Right.
to it when it comes up, the better chance we have of getting the additional sum.
And it really is an advantage with the grants because we can use that as matching, kind of a one-to-one. It really gives us an upper hand on other
We don't have
cities
any
that
money
do
put
that.
away, forget it.
Right. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And I think the final one is the supplemental park upgrades, and we currently have $500,000 a year for park upgrades. We really do need more. The condition of the parks are such that we have a lot of facilities that need a lot of work in terms of total renovation, like Verdugo Park. It's been a long time since that park has been renovated. The picnic shelters need to be redone, the playground equipment. We have Glorieta Park that needs renovation. As you know, just the restroom facility alone can cost $250,000 to $300,000 to renovate. So we're going through a number of renovations of restrooms, playground equipment, so we have things identified throughout the years to work on. But given the cost, the escalation of costs, construction costs, this is money that really is needed to maintain the current facilities that we have.
And how much do we have in the budget currently?
$500,000 a year.
500. So this will give you $750,000 a year.
And
Okay,
$500,000 will do one playground and one restroom.
Okay,
You know.
that's why I couldn't understand supplemental. It means you have X amount of dollars in the M&O program. This is to supplement that on an annualized
There's
basis.
$500,000 in existing CIP,
in CIP for
annually.
park upgrades.
So
To supplement
Right.
the general fund.
This would bring it up to $750,000.
No, there's $500,000 in the capital improvement program that you've already approved annually. This would supplement that by an
Okay.
additional $250,000.
So that would be $750,000 a year.
The general fund is just maintenance. It isn't carrying any capital in it for this purpose.
Right. So you want capital.
Right, this is the cap, and there's $500,000 a year now for that purpose. This would increase it to $350,000,
That'd be like at the Shoal Canyon
$750,000.
complex,
I'm sorry.
like the Shoal Canyon complex. It's pretty good size where you have to.
Now, George, in the existing CIP, do we have any new park development money?
We don't at this point. We had it before, but that was taken out.
Right, okay.
George, often I get inquiries on the lack of restrooms at our mini parks. And I know they weren't designed to be anything more than neighborhood parks. Is there I think at one of these League of Cities conventions, a prefab step up from your porta potty that isn't necessarily completely plumbed into the sewer where it's a cesspool where it's pumped out? Is there?
There is. We're currently
products like
using that at Griffith Manor. It's a really nice portable restroom, and they come in and service it weekly.
Well, let's understand, we can't use cesspools. I mean, you can no longer use,
No.
yeah.
Well, holding tank
it would,
or-
Substitute, yeah.
it would
They
be
have to
serviced.
be holding tanks
Right,
and
I
pumped
didn't
out
mean
periodically.
Right, it would be serviced. So really, some
What are the
nice
cost
ones.
of those, and is that something that
They're
council
about
has given you
$10,000 a
policy
year, $10,000
direction
to
on?
$12,000 a year for one of those units.
So you rent them, and then the company you
They
rent
come
them
in
from
and-
comes out and services them?
Yeah. We could do
Do
that.
you receive
We
the
could look into
complaints
that.
that I get on that? I
It's
mean, they
just not
say, despite it being telling them, well, it's a neighborhood park, and then the alternative is, well, there's a lot of senior citizens there, and when they got to go, they got to go. And oftentimes, the landscape bears the brunt of that,
Right, okay. We'll look into that.
to put it politely.
In some of these mini parks, the ability to expand them by a parcel gives you the ability to have room to put permanent restrooms in them. I'm thinking of Wilson, which is a highly utilized mini park. It's just full of mostly senior citizens and a lot of kids in the tot lot every day of the week, regardless of weekend or weekday. There's one that, we should probably have some priorities for those highly utilized parks like Wilson to more aggressively seek to acquire adjoining property. Wilson's one where you've got property on both sides, that if you acquired one parcel, you'd significantly increase the size of the park, and then you could have room to put permanent restroom facilities in the highly impacted parks.
Well, that's
Mr. Draymond. And then Mr. Weaver.
Not to belabor this, but this particular facility you're talking about, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. How many people does it accommodate?
It accommodates
This
one
particular-
person. Right, and it's ADA accessible. It's
And
big
is
enough.
it, how do you monitor in other words, monitor, there's a good word. Is it open all day long, 24 hours? Is it closed at certain hours? The security aspect.
It closes when the park closes. We close it, yeah. We lock the doors.
Okay.
It's like any other public restroom, really, except it has a door, and we come in and have the company service it. It's been working well at Griffith Manor, because we're redoing the restroom there.
The advantage is the company that owns it has to deal with the graffiti and vandalism issues. If it gets graffiti or vandalized, they might have to bring in a new unit. It's all part of your rental, as opposed to permanent facilities that we wrestle with that all the time.
They really are nice units. I saw my first one over at Huntington Memorial when they were renovating Huntington, doing some construction. And from there, we called the company and used the same model that they did. It really is upscale. It doesn't really look like a porta potty at all.
I'd really like to give some direction. I don't know, are we able to give direction at this point? Would my colleagues like to have this discussed more fully? I'm talking about 1 or 2 units at the most heavily used mini parks just to relieve the problem.
Yeah, I certainly would like to. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons is because not only do I have for a long time heard comments about this long before coming to council. This is a comment I hear from families all the time. We have the mini parks, but it goes hand in hand. Families, kids, and picnics, and needing a need for a restroom. The other thing is at the Montrose Shopping Park. That is one of the big issues because obviously you have families there, and so it's the merchants that end up having to make the decision in their mind whether or not to have the problem with their own insurance, to have people using facilities walking through perhaps a restaurant or through a kitchen or through a warehouse storage area. So we had done a lot of research into that. I know the ones you're talking about. I think I do anyway now, and they had looked into that, the placement of that kind of thing there. So I would absolutely be interested in exploring that for the mini parks.
Let me suggest we'll bring you back a report with those that we propose are the highest used and would be the first to roll out, and the costs and implications.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Weaver?
Yeah. In the past, I had suggested through roundabout ways to the school district, if they wanted to expand their facilities, when property became available that was adjoining the school, to consider purchasing the sites, continue to lease those sites out until they assemble enough parcels to actually expand it. The school site, the same would be true on any of the mini parks, as any adjoining parcels come up for sale that we may want to consider expanding on. We ought to consider the purchase and lease until such time as we can fund increasing. I think a lot of universities, I know USC has done that. They keep growing, they buy parcels, and eventually all of a sudden all the homes are cleared and they expand.
Yeah, Councilman Weaver, we do have our eye on several pieces of property. There's one
Good.
east of Wilson. If it ever comes up for sale, certainly we'll bring that to you. Also, there's an opportunity with Windsor Mini Park. Just south of that, there's several properties that are single-family or duplexes. To the north of Wilson is multifamily. It may be a little bit more expensive, but to the east of it is single-family. So we are keeping our eyes, short of eminent domain, and then we're keeping our eyes and ears open.
At least we can consider it if we know it's there.
Right.
As this downward cycle continues in real estate, certainly this is a time to identify and accumulate land. And I do more than identify. I would make at least an initial contact with them, just to let them know, kind of put it in the back of their mind so that they don't turn around and maybe sell it to another private party.
Right. Will do.
Mr. Stewart.
I think that's a good idea, along with the assessment of the highest impacted mini parks. We should look at those same parks and what are the opportunities that currently exist, and maybe make some affirmative contacts to let people know. You have any interest now? If you have an interest down the road, please let us know. And there may be people that hadn't thought about it before, but if the city's the buyer, there's no contingencies, we're cash only, it might, induce some interest for the highest impact parks, where we've got some opportunities.
Or even some tax incentive with friendly
Sure.
condemnation, that type of thing.
Sure. So we'll assemble that as well.
Thank you. think we're ready to move on.
I think the other one is Mountain Oaks and the Bonetto property listed on the next page.
Is that you, George?
Not sure that's me.
He's hoping it's not him, I think. We have not included funds here for Mountain Oaks or Bonetto, really just anticipating with respect to Mountain Oaks that there needed to be a council discussion yet about the potential zoning issues and threats from development. As we talked about, the possibility of the county and our supervisor being interested in recreation facilities, if there were interest in pursuing something with Mountain Oaks, there's certainly an opportunity with the county given its position with Crescenta Valley Park. And the fact that anything you do with that property should be done in conjunction with the park use that is there. Now, again, we haven't included any funding here. If there's an interest in opening a dialogue at some point with the owners after you've evaluated the information you've gotten from the city attorney's office on both zoning and potential for development, then we need to identify some dollars here in the plan, but as yet we don't know exactly what that would be. We've identified in the general open space discussion that historically we've seen open space generally going in the neighborhood of $20,000 to $50,000 an acre. Now, this could be considerably less given the constraints on it, but as we all know, people usually start with pretty high expectations. So as of yet, we don't have anything plugged in the plan for Mountain Oaks.
Okay, and I did receive the brief from the city attorney's office. Is that confidential, or is that?
Yes. It is confidential, yes.
That is a confidential brief, okay. Can I ask what the very latest is on Mountain Oaks that the city knows about?
Hassan, do you have any latest on
Is there
Mountain
anything-
Oaks? We haven't had an application submitted, so I don't think
Ever.
we know.
I mean, this has all been...
There's never been an application submitted, no. There was a discussion, an informal discussion in a meeting that I was involved in, I think Hassan was involved in, and this goes back 2 years ago, where the current owners spelled out what they anticipated was their concept. It was then that they and others associated with them went out in the community, and that resulted in, a year ago, the concern being expressed by residents in that area about the project. We've never had anything submitted formally to us. We have had inquiries over the years, as Mr. Howard's reports have indicated, and our responses have generally been that there are some significant hurdles for anybody to utilize this property, but beyond that, we've not had an application submitted.
Okay. Correct. Mr. Draymond?
Well, Councilmember Yusefian had asked several times in previous meetings about the potential for rezoning that area to an SR area. I would just like to say for my part that I would like to continue discussing that as a direction, whether it is, regardless of the current, the nature or the disposition of the current discussions, whether public, private, or whatever, I would like to continue an emphasis on looking at that as an option. And in particular, since he's not here today, I would like to express that point of view.
Right, and I also would like to do the same. And my feeling is this is a huge tract of land with a relatively flat meadow, and so I just think it's something that we need to consider. I don't know, how far we can go on this, but I just want to keep working on this parcel, because this is kind of out there, still under private hands.
Mr. Howard, do you have a comment?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I would urge you, if you haven't had the opportunity, because we just sent it out last week, dated October 16th, to review the memorandum regarding the potential for the rezoning of this property. And then we can certainly engage in a discussion. If the direction is if the council is to continue to pursue that, we can certainly work with planning and bring you back further information.
Mr. Draymond?
Well, I think, Mr. Howard, we've all read it, and that's exactly why I'm saying what I'm saying. It's just not knowing to what degree we can actually discuss it at this point, and that's the reason I'm hesitating. I think we've all looked at it. So that would be my request or my suggestion. I don't know how my colleagues feel, but that's why I'm raising the issue. I think it's worth looking at.
Mr. Weaver?
As I've said in the past, ever since they cut the oak trees down some 30 years ago, no development has occurred. Why? It's prime, and it hasn't occurred. So it's not likely it's going to occur tomorrow. There's good reasons why it's not has not been developed or proposed for redevelopment or for development in the past. So yeah, look at it, but I doubt if anybody's going to build there.
Well, I would still like to look at it, and the reason why, Mr. Weaver, is that as we go down the line and into the future, first of all, we can't predict what other councils may or may not do with regard to variances and so on, but even beyond that, I agree with you that the chances are quite limited. However, I'm also not convinced that as we go down the line, the state of California itself may not create some great incentives, emphasis, if not directives, to create housing and so on, and that concerns me as well. And that's the reason why I would like to look at it, especially because it may not involve any dollars to the city per se.
Well, I hope not, because after Flint Canyon, I said I would never vote for another purchase. If people want assessment districts formed to purchase it, I'll support it 100%.
Well, this would not involve purchasing it, and that's the very reason I'm suggesting it.
Well, okay.
And Mr. Howard, would a discussion on the ramifications of any potential zone change be an open session or a closed session?
That would be open session.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the brief that I'm a little confused. It's just about the brief that we received is confidential.
The brief that you received is confidential. However, if we come back to you with a report on both the process and the nature of a potential rezoning of this particular property, we will probably include some of the material that you received in your confidential attorney-client privilege memorandum in that report. Not all of it, but some of it.
Well,
Mr. Draymond.
And I'm not suggesting, by the way, that we shouldn't. I think it's necessary for the discussion.
Yeah, all I'm saying, Mr. Mayor, is that it is certainly not a confidential matter that it was raised here at this dais a number of times, that we were asking it is not confidential at all, as a matter of fact, that we had asked our city attorney to look into the rezoning issues vis-a-vis Mountain Oaks. And so the whole idea was this is a potential opportunity to accommodate the concerns of the public that this area might be developed in some future time in some commercial way in a manner that would not cost the city or any private entity money to do so. It would not be a purchase, in fact. It would be a rezoning of that property. And again, Mr. Yusefian had requested that several times, and I agree that we should look at that. What is contained in the brief may be confidential, but certainly the topic is not. And it's been discussed in open session a number of times. So I would be interested in taking a look at that and seeing what we can find out.
And if nothing, then we go down the other route.
Can we discuss it at this point?
Well, maybe by some, not by me necessarily. So I want to...
We can give you some information now, pursuant to the agendized item to discuss potential capital improvement projects. We can talk about the notion of that rezoning a property takes 4/5 vote of the council, for example, and people who protest within 20% of the landowners within adjacent to the property can create a requirement for a unanimous vote.
Scott,
That's the easy stuff.
what if the property owner itself objects to the rezone? Then do you automatically have a unanimous requirement?
No.
No.
Not
Okay.
if the property owner, and they need 20% of those with frontage of the area that's going to be rezoned. Now, if it's just the property that's going to be, if that's the only property that's going to be rezoned, then that's the 20%.
Okay. So they
And that also leads you into
Right,
another issue.
that raised
Should
other
you look
issues.
strictly at
Right.
that property, or should you look at some other properties as well? If you go through the memorandum, you'll see that there are pros and cons and legal issues involving one or the other.
We're dancing around the good stuff, but...
Let me say, though, in that regard, much like we did in the interface between single-family and multifamily residences, you are in a better position if you're looking at a number of properties in this same situation. Those existing properties that are, this one is
It's ROS.
ROS. Existing properties in ROS and their current stature and how the zoning could be evaluated and possibly changed in more than just one parcel, much like we did with the single-family and multifamily interface. You had 15, 16 different areas that you looked at. So there's less opportunity to say this is just about us. And in fact, you probably do have this same problem that exists in a number of different places in our foothill interface.
Mr. Quintero.
I also look at Mountain Oaks as potential park space. I mean, it was formerly a recreational area. It's got a beautiful meadow. Then you've got the hillsides all the way up to the ridge. So to me, I mean, I'm always looking at this as the potential to put together a park. It could be for equestrian use or camping or, I don't know, a rural type of environment, a sort of rural type of park. So, I mean, that's where I'm headed. However we get there, and I do agree with Mr. Draymond that, in fact, it seems to me that we could use monies outside of the city to help purchase it. But just think it's a tremendous resource, a potential to do something that we currently don't have. We don't really have an equestrian facility. I mean, we have equestrian zone property near the 134 Rancho, but this would be a unique opportunity for us, among other uses.
Anything more, Joe?
No, I would just like to, and I agree with all of that. I mean, this is what has been the subject of conversation not only here in this chamber, on this dais, but in the community since this whole recent round of discussions began. I mean, I don't know what we're waiting for in terms of moving forward with at least some discussion about it, and then we'll know. Whether or not there's a way to approach this that could accommodate recreational use there at some future date with a special recreational zone area. So I'm all for, if the consensus is there, I'm all for requesting or directing staff to move forward with a look-see at that.
Mr. Howard, can we discuss today the issues of a taking that were raised, or is that outside the scope of a CIP discussion?
Well, it would have some bearing on whether or not, I mean, it may or may not have any bearing on the direction you want to give us to further look at it. As I think trying to quickly encapsulate just a portion of the memorandum that was provided to you, as it would be in any similar case where you're looking at a downzoning from a commercial use to a recreational use, very fact-intensive. We mentioned the Penn Central factors, for example. Very fact-intensive. We probably wouldn't be able to give you an answer today on an individualized basis whether or not the downzoning of that property would or would not be a taking. The one thing that we did point out, I think, is that one prong factor that the courts used, the character of in this case, would be a potential downzone. How is that going to be looked at in the context of the facts? In other words, if you're focused specifically on this property as opposed to others, that may augur more in favor of the equitable notion that you're really trying to preserve this property and put the burdens on the property owner to preserve it as open space versus spreading that amongst all the taxpayers. But it's a very fact-intensive inquiry. I think we noted in the memorandum also that if we were going to go forward with something looking at this, we might want to look at what the value in that property, what value would be left in that property, so that at the end of the day, we would give you some assurances that if a downzone were to occur, we'd have a successful, or we as successful as we could be, a successful argument, hopefully, to a court that there is reasonable value left in the property and its use.
It's a very interesting discussion. I mean, aside from the taking issues involved, there's the whole issue of the the illegal subdivision nature of the properties.
And that's a different issue.
But in essence, it all goes towards the same point of, does the city want to acquire, does the city want to restrict development, does the city want to maintain it as park space or recreational space or equestrian space? When is the best time to discuss this? Because we've been waiting for this for quite some time, mainly in this context, whether we want to devote any funding or take any action towards preserving that property.
You've now got the full legal analysis, both on the whole issue of the lawfulness of the subdivision and the implications going back in time, bringing it forward, what that means today, and now you've got the whole notion of what would be the legal ramifications of a possible downzone and what would be the property owner's response to that. And so we've provided you with that. I think the next step would be, if the direction is given, is to work with planning staff, my staff work with planning staff, and possibly with some policy direction from the city manager, looking at the possible options, whether it's looking at this property along with others that interface with the foothills for open space, or whether it's focusing on this property and what the value would be left in this, what value would be left in this property if it were to be downzone from ROS to SR.
Mr. Mayor, if I can. Looking at the whole continuum of alternatives you have, one is kind of the in-the-front door approach, recognizing now all the limitations that the current owner is going to have on this property, and they are considerable. Frankly, opening up a discussion with the property owner about those issues, and if indeed that leads to a potential offering of the property, then you come in the front door and you look at that. But recognizing the concerns and the sensitivity of this property, the other end of the continuum is looking at, frankly, we don't have that conversation, but we look at a rezone. It just seems to me that we keep kind of beating around a core issue, which is, if we want to look at preserving the property and are concerned about that, we ought to, while we look at the zoning issues, we ought to also be having a conversation with the property owners about the considerable limitations on their ability to develop their property. And they're there, they're historical, it's not just a current issue, they have been there for as long as that property has existed. And have that conversation with the owners as well, in which case they may come to the realization that, you know what, instead of going through rezones and all of this, let's talk about a way in which the use of the property could either be acquired by the city or agree to limit its use, agree to a rezone of the property so we don't have parties who may be objecting and subsequently litigating over that. That's the missing piece in this, is, how the property owner is going to react to all of this.
Well,
and
Mr. Raymond?
I think you're correct, Mr. City Manager, but there's also another element too, and that's because we haven't really decided to dive in, we also should include other agencies that who have already expressed an interest to work with the city in preserving this property, such as Santa Monica Conservancy, the county. We just haven't, I want to encourage my colleagues to come on in. The water's fine. I mean, we can get into this and discuss this a bit. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to lead down the road of purchase of open space. It may not. But at least we'll have the facts, and we'll know what are all of the options, and come to a conclusion. I mean, this is an issue that otherwise is we're never going to see a resolution to it otherwise.
Okay, then.
Well, and I'm for that, so that's two.
So, Mr. Starbird?
Well, it seems to me we should be pursuing all of those.
Well, yes.
And again, one of the big missing pieces is just the property owners and what's their expectations.
So should we contact the property owners first and then include that in our discussion, or?
I think, as a resident of that general area, I think that, as long as we are having forward movement on discussions as to how to appropriately address their concerns, which have been ongoing, I think we're in good shape. But right now, we're not moving forward. It's just another item on a list, and we have a suggestion about a rezoning issue. Let's talk to the homeowners. Why not?
I wasn't talking, well, homeowners clearly.
I'm not necessarily talking about property owners alone. I'm talking about let's find out which of these directions. Were you referring specifically to property owners within that
Well,
tract?
to
or-
the property owner that owns that.
The primary property owner.
Primary
Yes,
Primary
I would
property
support
owner.
that.
That's what I'm referencing, is at some
I
point,
would
we should
support
just sit down with the primary property owner and say, hey, there's a concern about future development. There's a number of ways to approach the community's concern, which is through zoning, but there's another way, which is, what's your interest in selling the property?
Where are you at?
That's right. I mean, at this point, that becomes the kind of the elephant in the room that we're not recognizing is there, as we have somebody who could object, who could litigate, who could fight, whatever it is we plan on doing. And that's sort of the strengths and weaknesses the city attorney's memo gets to, is what if we have a recalcitrant landowner who frankly doesn't agree with anything you do relative to rezoning, in which case you could have a protracted litigation. So
Well-
let's just find out what their interests are.
But if we are met with that intransigence, then we know that one door has been closed, and so now we start exploring and opening other doors. I mean, that's the whole point. Let's try to get a handle on the issue and what potential allies we have out there in terms of helping to purchase the property. And I mean, let's just try to maybe not finalize it, but at least bring it to many more next steps that have to be taken.
Okay?
So
That would be,
That's some
I think that would be
direction, and
pursuing all of the options
and then
to
we'll-
begin to move this along.
And then when that occurs, let's agendize this.
Those items that would be appropriate for closed session, we bring into closed session. We can have a broader discussion in a public meeting about the zoning issues.
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. Okay, next, please.
The next item is a Bonetto property, and I have to go back and correct something, understanding I had earlier about what the property was acquired for. I was under the impression the property had been acquired for about $850 per parcel. I received later information that no, all three parcels were acquired for about $850,000. We currently have applications for development on all three parcels. Hassan, where's planning? The Bonetto property, we currently have applications for development on all three parcels?
I'm not certain, but I believe so. I could check out if you'd like.
Okay. We have not provided any funding here for further acquisition. Okay, unless there's some different direction, we'll move on to the library projects.
Do you want public first?
Would you like to hear the public before you leave, Mr.?
It's up to you, Mr. Mayor.
I think it brightened your day last week, and we'll do the
It
same
certainly
thing.
did.
Mr. Milano? Brighten our day, Mr. Milano. Mr. Weaver is staying especially for you.
Thank you, Mr. Najarian. Thank you, Councilman Weaver. Thank you, Councilman Draymond, Councilman Quintero, staff. My name is Herbert Molano. I am truly appreciative of the effort that all of you are taking and the interest that you are showing to the needs of park space, especially south of the 134. And especially because none of you live south of the 134 freeway, and it's sometimes with your personal experience that you begin to really sense the accumulated need that has transpired in quite a few years. I am concerned about different issues, for example, the manner in which we plan for our capital improvements and the way that we present this information to the public and even to yourselves. For example, we know that there is an accumulated need with regard to pavements of $51 million right now. There is a projected need for sewers for about $30 million to $38 million, depending on the use of a new power pump station at the Durant pump station. But somehow parks historically have been left aside. It's almost like if it is not part of the overall planning process. But now with the impact fees, we begin to move in the direction where, as the population increases, park needs become an integral part of that capital improvement process to solve the needs that are met in this area, especially south of the 134. Now, we would still, with many parks, have a significant unmet need for the population that is aged between, let's say, 7 years of age to 60. And so when we talk about providing parks and the parks becomes only a mini park, then we're leaving a significant portion of the population out. And this is the area where it is with the highest densities. And Mr. Weaver has mentioned that this might be the highest of any metropolitan area in Southern California. So now we have an opportunity to look at an aquatic facility. And we have the issues of size and location. I would suggest that maybe staff can look at two of the aquatic facilities in Henderson, Nevada, which contain some lap pool capability, but also has the focus in a very compacted area for providing the recreational aspects of the aquatic portions of it. With regard to the location, I think, Mr. Najarian, you hit it on the head. I think there's a fantastic opportunity, perhaps across Pacific Edison Park. The area today, it is being used by the GUSD, especially for the Path Achieve program, which is, I consider, a fantastic program by the GUSD. But there is area out there that could possibly be used if there's a cooperative approach that you guys take with the Unified School District. Because if you're going to find artificial turf for, let's say, Columbus Elementary or Roosevelt Middle School or Wilson Middle School or Hoover High School, I think that if the city provides an outlet with regard to the needs for soccer fields, then there could be a quid pro quo in facilitating some. So I think it's a good negotiating tactic. My last suggestion is that we take a look at what is the impact every time you bring in, or the city brings in, an additional 1,000 residents. It would be nice to have a kind of like a budget or an impact budget with regard to capital improvements whenever there is an additional 1,000 people. I think it's a good number to use. In industry and in cost accounting, we tend to use that. Say, what is the impact for X tonnage or for X quantity? And I think the city needs to look at its budgets based upon every additional increment of 1,000 people, with regard to infrastructures and roadway repair and sewer repair and the electric requirements and so forth. Because then it's packaged in a way that the public can understand, and you can extrapolate from that to the future growth of the city. But it also allows us to know that we are including all of the city's needs every time there is this additional impact of 1,000 people. And so that's my suggestion. And once again, I appreciate Mr. Weaver for staying over and for the discussion on Park South at 134.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. Thank you, Mr. Weaver. We'll see you this afternoon. Evelyn Hansen.
Thank you. My name is Evelyn Hansen. Hello, all. I actually had an answer from Mr. Weaver on warming the pools. You have asphalt in the parking lots, and I'll tell you, my little feet when I was a kid walking barefoot on that asphalt would have told you how warm that stuff gets. You're going to have, according to some of the diagrams, the asphalt parking lot was pretty close to some of those pools. You just run a few pipes out there in the asphalt, and you bring in a lot of heat, to answer his question. Also, with global warming, the projections for Southern California are that it's supposed to become Nevada and Arizona-like. You go in Tucson, Arizona these days, you see a lot of shelters in virtually every large parking lot. There's additional roof space for either photovoltaic panels or solar panels. I'd also like to remind you, with all this additional water and grass, and although the artificial grass is a great idea, we have additional opportunities to use our gray water instead of potable water that we're trying to cut back on the use of. And Mr. Draymond, on the Dunsmore tennis courts, Google Maps is this wonderful new thing that's available on the Internet. You might circle, you can save it as a picture, a JPEG file or bitmap, and take it into some graphics program and circle what you're talking about and email it. Would be a great way to describe more graphically what you're talking about. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Draymond.
I am aware of Google Maps. I think we all are. It's just that those maps are not updated on a moment-by-moment basis, and so a lot of areas, when you look at them, you don't get a clear picture or an up-to-date picture. And also, anywhere where there are trees, you very often can't see what's on the ground. And so spotting a tennis court underneath a bunch of trees may not. We have folks up in the park anyway, so I think they can just walk over and take a look.
Thank you. Mr. Starbird. Should we start with the library projects?
It's up to you, or... this is a good place to break if you want to continue with this next week. Entirely up to you.
Let me ask a broader question. Is there light at the end of the tunnel in the CIP? We've really hit the ground running since April, didn't we, John?
Yes.
We told John it was only going to be
Yes,
half
we
days
did.
on Tuesdays, and he wants his money back. But in all seriousness, what would you forecast the schedule of these CIP discussions?
I think you have one more session to get through the list of the projects. You've got libraries, some of which you've talked about before, the wireless, some of the infrastructure issues, but you've got about a page left. At the rate you've been going, I think you can finish this up in a study session. Then we, your staff, need to do some work on the resources side. You're going to be making a decision on the tax increment allocated for parks and libraries. We have the impact fee estimates. We need to plug those in and then work with what is a projected deficit in every year of the CIP of one magnitude or another, but the revenue side is not completed, and we need to then plug in some of the revisions to the estimate side and then come back to you with what the picture of the CIP looks like and start pushing things around again, looking for other alternatives. So I think you have another study session, then you probably have a couple more beyond that.
Okay.
We get about an hour and a half per study session, so
Okay.
before we start losing you all.
So we have libraries next, and maybe we should break. It's a convenient spot to pick up next time. But Mr. Quintero insists that we hold it over until he returns, I think. Are you going to be here?
Oh, no, I'll be here during the day.
Will you be here October 30th?
I would not miss a CIP
I knew-
session
I knew
under any
it's,
circumstances.
We feel the
There's no
same
better way
way.
to start the day. So why don't we schedule it for next week?
We'll take up
then?
next Tuesday with libraries.
Charge.
Thank you again for your
Is there a
time.
motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded?
Yes, seconded.
We're adjourned.